They told my daughters I was dead. 15 years later, one of them found me, at her own wedding. We were huddled around our usual table at the Rusty Anchor, the kind of small-town dive bar where everybody knew your name and your business. It was Friday night, the end of another long workweek, and the four of us were half listening to Bill Carson tell the same story for the third time that month. He had just found out his wife of 25 years had cheated on him, years ago apparently, but the wound was still fresh. The rest of us, Mike, Johnny, and Lou, kept reminding him how messy and expensive a divorce could be. They meant well. We'd all been friends for what felt like a lifetime, and they'd welcomed me into their circle not long after I moved to their coastal town over a decade ago. We all shared one thing in common, the core. Every one of us had served in the Marines, and that bond never really fades, even after you trade the desert for flannel and beer. As for me, I ended up here in Southport by sheer chance. Literally. 10 years back, I chucked a dart at a wall map and promised myself I'd settle wherever it landed. Fate, or maybe dumb luck, brought me here. I arrived with nothing but a packed truck, a quiet past, and a plan. Through a fresh offshore LLC I had set up, I bought the only grocery store in town. Nothing fancy, just a basic shop that served the local loggers and their families. But it had potential. Within the first year, I expanded the place, added beer, liquor, and a proper selection of essentials. The store tripled in size, and I later tacked on a gas bar. Now it was the lifeline of the town. I had 8 full-timers, 6 part-timers, and the shelves stayed stocked. Folks didn't have to drive 40 minutes to the next town just to pick up milk or fill up their tanks anymore. After a year of laying low and putting in the hours, I bought a stretch of land on the edge of town from a tax auction. That's where I built my log home, 3 bedrooms, all wood, sitting high enough to catch the coastline view. My friends pitched in, helping me sketch out the design and hauling logs from the mill where they worked. I got the raw timber at wholesale, stripped the bark myself, and saved a ton in the process. It was honest work and I was proud of it. But there was always one thing that seemed to set me apart. I never dated. I'd never so much as flirted with anyone since I got here. Not that I didn't notice the glances or the gentle nudges from the women around town. They gave up soon enough. Folks started calling me private, which was putting it kindly. Truth was, nobody really knew anything about me, where I came from, what my life had been before. And I preferred it that way. There were whispers, of course. Some thought I might have been widowed, others guessed I'd been burned. But no one pried too hard. I didn't talk much about my past, and over time they stopped asking. I had set up my finances to keep things simple. The LLC paid all the taxes, and anything I used personally came out of retained equity. On paper I had no income. No personal credit card. Just cash or debit always. I even went by my middle name here, Lucas. Only a handful of people knew that wasn't my first. The town welcome sign read, "Next stop, Japan," just a cheeky nod to how remote we were. What nobody knew was that I'd come here from New York, trying to leave an entire life behind. A life I wasn't sure I'd ever be ready to talk about. I always used to joke, though maybe only half joking, about what kind of person would name a town something like Eastbridge. It was a mouthful and made no sense unless you'd grown up here. But after the second beer that night, we dropped the topic. We had more pressing things to focus on. Bill's oldest boy, Nathan, was coming home from college. Not just that, he was bringing his fiancée with him, and there was going to be a big backyard barbecue to celebrate both his graduation and his engagement. Bill's wife, Connie, had driven out to Seattle to pick them up, and we were all invited to their place the next day. Bill cut himself off after 2 drinks, said he wanted to be stone sober when Nathan and his fiancée arrived. "Last thing I want," he mumbled, "is for her to think I'm just some small-town lush." Truth is, we all knew how proud he was. Nathan had just landed a job with one of the biggest investment firms in Manhattan. Bill couldn't stop beaming. Saturday came and I was, predictably, the last to show up. I had a habit of doing that, mostly to dodge the matchmaking missions my friends' wives loved to spring on me. It was a whole game to them, trying to figure out if I was straight, closeted, a monk, or just plain uninterested. Their curiosity fed the local gossip mill, and I wasn't in the business of giving answers. As I pulled up in my old '78 Ford pickup, Rock, as I'd nicknamed her, Connie stepped onto the porch with a grin. That truck might have been older than some of the kids at the party, but she was my pride and joy. Connie waved me down like I was late to something important. "You've got to meet Nathan's girl," she said. "Redhead. Name's Katie. 22. Comes from a big family, 3 brothers, 2 sisters." I gave her a tight nod, already uneasy. I felt my stomach twist. Redhead. That word alone could freeze me in place. One glance was often enough to drag up ghosts. You know, every time you meet a redhead, You clam up like someone flipped a switch, Connie added, giving me a look that was half concerned, half poking the bear. Always wondered if it was a redhead who messed you up back in the day, but Lord knows you never talk about it. She handed me a cold bud. Go on. Backyard's packed. Try not to vanish into a corner. I took the beer and made my way out back where the party was already in full swing. All the regulars were there, my buddies, their wives, their kids, plus a few folks I didn't recognize. The smell of grilled ribs drifted through the air, mixed with the sound of kids running barefoot on grass and old rock tunes playing on Bill's radio. Nathan spotted me right away and rushed over, pulling me into a tight hug. Man, thank you again, he said for maybe the 100th time. I wouldn't be where I am if it weren't for what you did. Paying off those loans, you changed my life. I just smiled and clapped him on the back. You earned it, kid. I just helped clear the runway. He grinned wide, then turned to pull someone from the crowd. Hey, come meet Katie. And then time stopped. She turned. One look and I felt like the ground beneath me shifted. My face went pale and something in my chest locked up. Every instinct told me to walk away, maybe even run. But I couldn't move. I was staring at a ghost from a life I'd buried a long time ago. Katie. She wasn't just some girl. She looked like her mother, so much so it hit me like a freight train. The hair, the eyes, the way she smiled before she even said a word. It was unmistakable. A spitting image. And that's when it hit me, Katie was one of the triplets. The last time I saw her was the morning everything changed. The last time I saw her mother, I'd walked in on something that burned itself into my memory like a scar that never faded. I had caught my brother, Daniel, in her master bedroom with her. With Julia. Julia, the woman I'd loved more than I could ever admit. A redhead like no other, fiery, magnetic, confident to the core. She stood about 5'6", all curves and composure. Everything about her pulled you in. But that day the shock of betrayal was so raw I couldn't even speak. Now, all these years later, standing in the middle of a backyard party, I found myself face to face with her daughter, Katie. Julia's daughter. My daughter. Katie's eyes were the same shade of blue as her mother's. When she turned and saw me, it was like time folded in on itself. Her face lit up with this wide, open smile, but her eyes filled instantly with tears. Not of pain, no. These were tears of recognition. Of something deep and buried being uncovered at last. And I felt it too. I went stiff. My jaw locked. My heart wanted to collapse in on itself. I could barely breathe. Because right then and there, staring into her face, I realized just how much I had missed. How much had been stolen from me. The birthdays, the scraped knees, the bedtime stories. Gone. Oh my God, she gasped through sobs, rushing toward me like a wave that couldn't be stopped. I don't believe it. I didn't know what I'd expected, but it sure wasn't this. I hadn't seen her since she was 7 years old. Back then she still had braids and scraped elbows. Now she was a woman. My daughter. I could see her mother in every movement, every blink, every tear. It was beautiful and unbearable all at once. She threw her arms around me and I held her like I was afraid she might disappear again. Her face buried into my neck, and my hands clung to her back, as though the years of loss could somehow be pulled back into place with one embrace. The flood of emotion hit both of us hard. There was no stopping it. We cried openly, not caring who saw. Every sob echoed through the backyard, and the conversations around us slowly died out as people turned to witness something they didn't understand, but felt all the same. No one spoke. They didn't need to. Because once the truth shows itself, once the past crashes into the present, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. The love I had buried for so long, out of fear, out of shame, out of grief, rose to the surface like it had been waiting for this moment. And Katie, she didn't hesitate. She clung to me like she was trying to make up for every year we'd lost. 15 years of silence ended in a single moment. And that's when the old stories, the buried truths, started coming back. About how my Uncle James, my stepfather, would always shut down when we asked about my daughters. How he'd go quiet instead of giving answers. That was his way of hiding. His way of keeping the truth locked up. But the truth doesn't stay buried forever. Back then I had trusted the wrong people. I had believed lies because I thought it was better for everyone. But now, holding my daughter in my arms, I saw it clearly, the cost of staying silent. The damage of hidden truths. The kind of pain only those who've been cut off from their own blood can ever truly understand. I should have fought harder. I should have been there. And as those thoughts poured through me, the tears came again, fresh, hot, and unstoppable. I wasn't crying just for myself anymore. I was crying for both of us. For the little girl who needed her father. And for the man who had let her down, even if it wasn't entirely his fault. That was when the call happened. My grandfather had always been the kind of man who saw through people. No nonsense, sharp as a razor. He had gotten wind of what was going on, and when he called, he made sure to put it on speaker. "Let me ask you something, Joan," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Are those 3 girls really his?" There was a long silence. Then Joan, Katie's mother, Julia's sister, finally answered, "Yes." But Grandpa wasn't letting her off the hook. "And how do you know for sure?" he asked, pressing like a man who already knew the answer. "Considering your history, maybe we ought to get a blood test. You've shown yourself to be less than trustworthy." Joan exploded. Her voice went sharp and defensive. There was no guilt, no shame, no regret, just anger, raw and loud. She wasn't sorry she'd been caught. Not one bit. And as the call went on, Grandpa looked over at me. He saw the tears streaming down my face and didn't say a word. Just gave me this look, like he understood exactly what it meant to carry heartbreak that deep. My world was falling apart, one word at a time. I could barely stand as I listened to my grandfather speak on speakerphone, his voice tired but sharp with conviction. "Do you love James?" he asked her, plain and direct. And Joan, cold as ice, answered without hesitation. "Yes." That was it. The nail in the coffin. She explained that after I caught them together all those years ago, James had proposed and she accepted. Just like that. No remorse. No apology. Like it was the most natural thing in the world to marry your husband's brother. My grandfather was silent for a beat. Then his voice dropped low, laced with a mix of pain and fury. "So let me get this straight. James stole his younger brother's wife. His children. His life. What kind of man does that to his own blood?" He paused. "And what kind of woman goes on to become a politician after all that?" Then came the crack. He slammed his fist into the wall. Art. Broke a knuckle clean. I didn't even flinch. I was still standing in the backyard holding Katie, my daughter, tight against me, the weight of years and lies crashing in on both of us. I whispered into her hair, "Jennifer, this was never my choice." She looked up at me, confused, her eyes brimming again. "The truth is, our families decided it was best this way." That was their excuse. They said it would protect everyone. I told her I had recordings. Evidence. A call her mother made with a judge. Her mother and uncle, no, my brother, had pulled strings to cover their tracks. Careers were on the line, reputations too. It was a mess that 2 families had chosen to bury me under. And they almost got away with it. "But I can play it for you," I said gently, still holding her. "That call, it'll explain more than I can right now." Katie didn't say anything. She just nodded against my chest. Trying to bring the moment back to something lighter, something human, I smiled and added, "Oh, and for the record, I approve of my son's choice in a wife." That finally made her laugh. And me too. A real laugh. A needed one. We walked back toward the party, hand in hand, father and daughter reconnecting through the wreckage. By the time we returned, most of the cleanup had already been done. Bill and Connie were up front, getting everyone's attention. Bill raised his voice with that unmistakable pride in his chest. "Most of you don't know this, but our son Nathan graduated debt-free, because of a private scholarship. From a man I call my best friend. And now, my son's future father-in-law, Charlie." He turned toward us. "Katie, welcome to the family." The applause that followed blurred in my ears. I wasn't fully present, still half lost in memories and emotions I hadn't let myself feel in over a decade. But Katie's hand in mine kept me grounded. Later that evening, I drove us back to my place in the hills. Katie insisted on taking the wheel, wanted to try her hand at the gravel road that curved up to my cabin. She stalled the engine 5 times in a row, cursing and laughing the whole way. I hadn't laughed like that in years. Simple as it was, that drive became a memory I'd carry for the rest of my life. Inside, I lit up the wood stove to fight the chill that crept in after dark. We set her bags down in the guest room, her room now, and I gave her the full tour. It didn't take long for her to fall in love with the place. Rustic charm, mountain air, the scent of cedar and smoke. Was all new to her. But what hit hardest was when she spoke, her voice trembling just a little. "My mom, she always said you didn't care. That you walked away. That it was your choice." I froze. "She claimed to love you right up until the end," she said. "But now, I don't even know what to believe." I didn't know what to say to that. Because when someone you love betrays you, it's not just the trust that breaks. It's your whole understanding of what love ever meant. "I don't know if it was hate," she continued softly, "but the way they treated you, it wasn't right. And I'm sorry. For what it's worth." I just nodded, swallowing back more tears. It's gonna take time, she whispered, to figure all this out, to undo it in my head. I placed a hand on her shoulder and gave it a gentle squeeze. That's okay, Katie. We've got time now. Even now, I'm not sure I fully understand it all. And maybe that's the hardest part. There may never be a satisfying explanation for what they did. The betrayal, the lies, the cold manipulation that stretched across two families and left me a ghost in my own life. When Katie asked how all of it happened, I tried to explain the best I could. There's a good chance their marriage isn't even legal, I said quietly. It was all smoke and mirrors designed to make sure I couldn't be found. To bury me. I told her about the structure I'd built. The international corporation, the LLC. Everything was done not to avoid taxes, but to distance myself from the systems that had once controlled my life. Every cent I used came from retained earnings. No direct income. No footprints. My computer room is where I manage it all, I explained. The business, the investments, it's done well. More than I ever expected. She looked at me, not quite grasping the full weight of what I was saying. So I gave her the part that mattered most. My grandfather warned me, I said, voice thick. He told me there'd be a day when the truth came out. That it would take time, but eventually it would all rise to the surface. I paused, remembering the way he'd looked at me that night years ago, eyes fierce and steady. He said, only then will you be free. But freedom, it doesn't come clean. Katie stayed silent, but I knew she was listening. They took your name, your future, your chance to start over, she whispered. They took your kids. I nodded. They built a box and locked me inside it. Sure, I had money. I had comfort. But I wasn't living. I was surviving by their rules. And now, I'm technically free, I said. But the box still casts a long shadow. There was a quiet moment between us. Then I added, it's my fault too. I could have fought harder. Could have refused to go along. But I didn't. I thought I was protecting both families, doing the right thing. I stood up and walked into the computer room. On the shelf above my desk was a thick black binder full of documents, records, a paper trail of everything they'd hoped would stay buried. I kept it all, I said, just in case the day ever came. Stephen, Katie's fiancé, had helped me behind the scenes. His phone was our lifeline. My stockbroker, under my instructions, had been buying shares quietly, every day until August 5th. Sell only what was necessary to cover margin. The rest? Wait. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. That Sunday morning, the dam broke. The phone call between the former judge and Joan, my wife, or so she once was, leaked. So did the video. The one of her and James, my brother, in that master bedroom. It hit the internet like a thunderstorm. The hosting site crashed under the weight of the views. Within hours, national outlets had picked it up. The headline read, Family Betrayal, Political Fallout, The Scandal of Senator James Barnes. Suddenly, everything they tried to suppress became front-page news. My father called me not long after. You know, he said, your daughters turned out pretty incredible. I smiled. They did. But how did Katie find you? He asked. I told him the truth. By accident. She had been introduced to Stephen's family at a graduation party. When Stephen brought me over to her, she knew me. Right away. Just one look and all the years disappeared. We've been in contact ever since, I said. Quietly. He asked if I'd be at the wedding. I will, I told him. But I'm flying in Thursday night with Stephen's parents. Gotta stay out of sight until then. Still a few loose ends. And there were. The stock started climbing again, stabilized at 35 a share by Friday afternoon. Quiet confidence returned to the market. But the walls were closing in on James. He was now under formal ethics investigation in the Senate. Media calls for his resignation were relentless. Every hour, another outlet ran with the story, digging deeper, calling for accountability. And in his first and so far only public statement, James stood at the podium, face like stone, and said, Joan and I didn't begin a relationship until after my brother's reported passing. No emotion. No shame. Just spin. But the world had already seen the truth. And this time, no one was letting it go. There I was, standing beside the bride, and it still didn't feel real. I was breathing, moving, smiling even, but inside I felt like a ghost. Like the Walking Dead. I'd been walking around for years, unseen, unheard, pushed to the margins of my own story. But not today. Today I was center stage. Jennifer, my daughter, stood radiant in her wedding gown, an image of grace and strength. When I stepped up beside her, we exchanged a soft kiss on the cheek, and then we walked arm in arm down the aisle. Her head held high, my heart barely holding together. There was pride on both our faces, and the photographer caught every second of it. The moment was ours. That's when I saw her. Joan. Even from behind, she looked almost exactly the same. Age hadn't dulled her figure, her poise. She led the bridal procession like nothing was out of place. Like history hadn't crumbled behind her. From a distance, you might have admired her elegance. But I knew better. Following close behind were the flower girls and ring bearers, faces bright and full of joy. But it was my brother and Joan, James and Joan, who stood out in the most telling way. They were ghostly pale, frozen. Neither one could bring themselves to look me in the eye. Not once. Their gazes never left the ground for the entire ceremony. That alone said everything. Later that evening, during the reception, I must have been asked 24 times how I ended up as the best man in my son-in-law's wedding. People assumed I had introduced Stephen to Jennifer. Some joked about fate. Others guessed there was a long story there. They had no idea. But the whispers got louder when it came time to sign the marriage license. When I wrote out my full legal name on the form, I heard the priest gasp softly. A few of the guests who knew me well enough to recognize the signature froze. Murmurs started moving through the room like wind through leaves. The truth was officially written in ink. I wasn't dead. I never had been. I was very much alive. And now, visible. As Stephen walked through the reception greeting guests, ever the gracious host, Joan was another story. She looked shattered. Pale. Rattled in a way I had never seen before. She didn't even try to pretend everything was fine. That's when Jennifer confronted her. "Mom," she said calmly but loud enough for those nearby to hear, "you should know. Dad didn't find me. I found him." Joan's eyes widened. Her lips parted like she might speak, but nothing came. "I had all the information," Jennifer continued. "Everything you and Uncle James did. Dad didn't even know I was collecting it. He just gave me copies reluctantly so I could show my sisters the truth." Her voice didn't shake. She wasn't angry, she was resolute. "What you two did, it's unforgivable," she said. "You tried to erase him. Make him the villain. Make him nothing. But I decided it was time we set the record straight." Joan didn't answer. What could she say? The lies were already unraveling. And while Jennifer got to know her new in-laws that weekend, I had the chance to quietly take in something I hadn't dared to hope for: my daughters. All three of them. They had grown into strong, beautiful, thoughtful women. Seeing them together, laughing, crying, dancing, it brought me more joy than I knew how to carry. Later that night, Jennifer told me something that stayed with me. "We went through everything," she said. "All those photos, all those clippings, the notes you kept. I realized you knew more about me than I even remembered about myself." Then she smiled. "And you had one of those binders for each of us." She paused. "It proved to me you never stopped loving us. Not for a second." The only awkward moment came during the family photos when Joan and James had to stand nearby. Nobody forced conversation. Nobody forced smiles. The photographer did their job and we all went through the motions. But the tension was thick. Then came the speeches. Jennifer stood next to Stephen, holding the mic, her voice strong. "To both of my fathers," she said, "thank you. You made me the woman I am today. I'll never forget that." And when the bride and groom took the floor for their first dance, the room melted away. They moved like they belonged in that moment. Just the two of them. Lights dimmed, soft music wrapped around them like a blanket. They owned that room. And I stood in the back, silent, with tears in my eyes. Because despite everything that had been taken from me, my name, my home, my children, my place in the world, here I was. And somehow, I had made it back. I don't think I've ever seen a bride more radiant than Jennifer. She was glowing, graceful and full of joy, and for a moment I let myself believe this was how it was always meant to be. That maybe life hadn't stolen quite everything. Judy and Joan, oddly enough, kept pulling me out onto the dance floor. It felt strange at first, but not in a bad way. Like they wanted to reclaim some kind of connection, however complicated, with the man they once wronged. Outside of my mother, those two seemed to occupy every minute of my time that night. And I didn't fight it. I just let the music move, let the night happen. Then the master of ceremonies took the mic and made the announcement. "It's time for the bride and her father to share their dance." My heart stuttered in my chest. Jennifer stepped into the spotlight and extended her hand. And just like that, we were dancing, father and daughter, finally. As we moved, my mind slipped, drifting to a memory I hadn't allowed myself to revisit in years. Back to the war. Back to a hillside no one could forget. One of my brothers in arms had taken position to draw fire. We'd pre-planned the route, Multiple charges were set to scatter the enemy. He stayed put, turning, aiming, firing again and again into enemy strongholds up the hill. He took 23 bullets before he dropped. Only 8 were serious. But his stand broke their backs. To this day, every man who was there says he saved all our lives. And so, standing in front of this crowd, I told that story. My voice shaking slightly. I'm here tonight to present 2 Purple Hearts, I said. One for the man who saved us all, and one for the part of myself I lost but finally found again. I looked at Jennifer, and she understood. Later that night, back home, I padded down the stairs wearing my usual black socks and those cheap beat-up running shoes I loved. Designer fashion was never my thing. Never needed it. I always felt richest when I was dressed like this, driving my old Ford down the gravel roads, living a simple life. The house was full. My mom and dad, Bill and Connie. Their whole clan, 7 kids strong and 2 of my daughters. Connie was in the middle of telling my girls how I had once saved her marriage, how for over a decade, everyone tried to figure me out. To this day, she laughed, we still don't know what finally cracked him open. I just shook my head and smiled. Things were unfolding fast. The world now knew who James Barnes really was. CNN was airing specials, spinning his downfall as a cautionary tale. Some praised Joan, calling her bold, a feminist icon for her choices. But even those cheers were being picked apart. People were asking harder questions now. About betrayal. About ambition. About what really happens behind the doors we never open. Reporters showed up in our quiet little town trying to find scandal, hoping to stir things up. But most folks had nothing but kind words. They saw what had happened. They knew who had been wronged. They said Senator James Barnes paid a steep price for chasing power, someone told me. He got tangled up with the wrong woman at the wrong time. And all I could do was smile. Jennifer pulled me aside before she and Stephen left for their honeymoon. That gift you gave us, she said quietly, it'll set us up for life. We're investing it. 5 years. No splurging. No mistakes. She wouldn't say how much it was, but that wasn't important. She looked me in the eyes when she said, we want to build a future that makes you proud. And that was worth more than anything. Before she left, Joan spoke, softly, almost like she was trying to offer some final truth before the door closed completely. The threads, she said, of what we did, they're starting to unravel. No one knows where it will end. Power and money, you never know what they'll protect until it's too late. I didn't respond. Some things don't deserve answers. James, for what it's worth, had quietly started a so-called 8-week vacation. Rumor had it he had money set aside, but emotionally he was falling apart. Without Joan, without the Senate, without the lies to hide behind, he had nowhere left to stand. As for Joan, she seemed lost, trying to appear strong but fraying at the edges. Her world was slipping and she could feel it. Me. I was still that simple man in the cheap shoes, walking barefoot through the ashes of a life I once lost. But I wasn't a ghost anymore. I had my daughters. I had my name. And I had the truth. I think she needs to get away, Judy said as we sat quietly together that morning, the last after the wedding. She hasn't looked this alive in a long time. She was talking about Barbara. She was at the wedding last night, Judy continued. And for the first time in years I saw something light up in her. She said she noticed someone, a man who carries himself with quiet confidence. I raised an eyebrow, sipping my coffee. She meant you, Judy smiled. Is it okay if I introduce her to you? I chuckled, leaning back. Of course it is. But you know we fly back tomorrow. What are you afraid of? She asked. I didn't answer right away. I hadn't expected any of this. Not the wedding. Not the reunion. Not Jennifer. And certainly not Barbara. My life had been shaped around silence, discipline, distance. Even when I tried to rebuild, it was on my terms. Measured, planned, controlled. But Barbara? She wasn't part of the plan. She was something else entirely. Life had always moved fast for me. I'd earned my degree in just 3 years. By the time the twins were born, I already had 6 years of experience under my belt. I got my first discharge from the Marines when they were toddlers. At 44, I still felt like a young man. My father used to call me an overachiever, and maybe I was. I poured that energy into launching my brokerage firm. With the explosion of computer tech, the business took off. In just 4 years, we had offices across North America. But success came at a cost. I was on the road more than I was home. I wasn't always the most attentive father. I thought if I worked hard enough, they'd understand. Turns out they did. Saturday night, as we stood under the stars, Jennifer had pulled me aside. I talked to Joanne, she said. She thought you'd say yes. Say yes to what? I asked. To helping Barbara, she said. To giving her the space she needs. You've made it possible for her to finally put the past behind her. Then she leaned in and kissed me on the cheek. Thanks, Dad. I knew you'd come through. Barbara accepted the position, and something shifted. The guarded woman I had first seen at the wedding began to fade. What emerged was a kind, warm, loving person with a gentle strength that drew people in without demanding attention. Everyone noticed the change. My father, being a lawyer, drafted a power of attorney so Judy could help manage things for Barbara while she transitioned. It was a formality, but it mattered. She'd fallen in love with the log home the moment she stepped inside. I told her dusk came between 9:30 and 10, and as we walked through the door I casually mentioned, "You're only the second person to ever stay in this house." Neither of us knew then that she'd never leave. Tuesday morning I woke early. She was already up. And what I saw as she came down the stairs, jeans, soft sweater, no makeup, hair pulled back, stopped me cold. It was like watching someone step out of the clouds and straight into sunlight. Fresh. Oh, beautiful. She smiled. Morning. The connection was so natural, so easy, I barely noticed how quickly things were shifting. Later that week, she looked at me with this little half grin and said, "Just so you know, all three of them think you're amazing." Judy made me promise to give her daily updates on how we're doing. I laughed. "Are we being supervised?" "Definitely," she said. "But don't worry. I told them what I think." "And what's that?" She leaned in. "That my dad's a good man. And good men deserve good, honest women." After coffee that morning, I took her into town to get her Washington State driver's license. She insisted on driving back, following me all the way home, smiling the whole time. When we got back, I unloaded the groceries. But before I could finish, she stopped me at the door. "Go sit down," she said. "This is my kitchen now." She pulled out the dish soap and scrubbed down every cabinet before unpacking a single item. It was like watching someone move into their forever home, not just a place to stay but a place to belong. She took her time setting everything up just right. I stood in the doorway watching quietly, realizing she was building a life. With me. I should have seen the signs. But truthfully I didn't. I thought she was just being helpful. I didn't realize how deeply she had decided this would be her home. Later, as I got ready to leave for the day, she handed me a quick kiss on the cheek and said, "Dinner's at 6 o'clock. And it always will be unless I'm working. Don't be late." That's when it finally hit me. She wasn't just organizing the kitchen. She was settling into my world and turning it into our home. When I came back that afternoon, she was measuring the windows for blinds and curtains. She'd found the tape measure in the pantry toolbox, of all places. She wasn't asking for permission. She was claiming space. Not with demands but with love. And for the first time in years, I let her.